players should you add for Week 12 of the fantasy football season? Welcome, football fans and fantasy freaks, to my favorite ads of Week 12. These are the players that will help you push to the playoffs and save you from the bye week struggles. If that sounds good, spike the like button and don't forget to subscribe for weekly waiver wire targets here on OwnersBox Fantasy. Speaking of OwnersBox, before I get started with my 10 favorite editions of Week 12, there's one final week to sign up. If you haven't already, a great promotion for first timers on OwnersBox Fantasy. I'm talking about 500 free player pick entries, only to new users this final week, guys, Week 12 of the NFL season. Player picks is our more or less props game. Super easy to play and even easier, potentially, to win. Use the code PP100 and you'll get a free $100 player pick entry when you deposit $10 or more. The link is in the description, the pinned comment. That is PP100. Now check out my favorite ads of Week 12. Spike that like button, guys. Let's go. Let's begin with an abnormal position to begin this video with, but I want to begin with the tight end position because this is a chaotic position, and there was an absolute baller on Sunday who took over the position, and he made it his own. Taysom Hill. Now, Taysom doesn't have just one position. No. He can play running back. He can play wide receiver. He can play quarterback. He could play kick returner. He could play defense probably. But he does reside at the tight end position in fantasy football, and that's why he's so useful in fantasy football, because even if he has a down game, he always has the opportunity, the chance to have a 3-tutty game, to have a rushing game, to have a receiving game. On Sunday, Taysom Hill had one of the greatest fantasy performances that I've ever seen for a tight end. 7 rushes, 138 yards, 3 touchdowns, 8 catches on 10 targets for 50 yards, and he threw the ball. Taysom Hill, if he's available in your league, he may be available about around 50% of leagues, but I had to kick it off with Taysom Hill because he's one of the best all-around football players in the NFL. And now that the Rizzler is the coach of the New Orleans Saints, I do think that Taysom is going to become an important part of their identity. Now that the Saints don't have Rashid Shaheed anymore, Chris Olave, this team is desperate for playmakers. Their run game has been pretty lackluster as of late for pretty much weeks now. I mean, like half the season, it feels like, with Alvin Kamara. They need to get their run game going. The best way to get it going is with Taysom Hill, using that extra guy in the run game. The quarterback, Taysom Hill, right? So not only can he be a weapon running the ball, being a red zone weapon as well, but also a guy that can explode for big gains, as we saw against the Browns. This is not an easy defense to have big games against either, and he did it against Cleveland. On top of that, we're seeing him actually develop as a receiving option in this offense for Derek Carr, where he's becoming reliable as a yak threat underneath. He's moving the chains, and he's also working the middle of the field. So yeah, if Taysom Hill is available, there's not many tight ends in the NFL with a higher ceiling on a weekly basis. There might not be any based on what we just saw on Sunday. So Taysom Hill is definitely somebody that's worth the shot at a position that is pretty much boom or bust anyways. Taysom Hill is the ultimate boom or bust. Now, if you want to go for a more reliable, maybe cheaper option at the tight end position, there are other names. We've discussed Jonnu Smith quite a few times on this channel. Hopefully he's already on a couple of your teams already because we've talked about him a couple times. But if you haven't, he had an explosive game on Sunday. He had 8 targets, 6 catches, 101 yards, and 2 tutties in his game against the Raiders. He probably won't put up a stat line quite like this for the rest of the season, but he's having arguably the best season of his career, right? It's funny because I'm a Patriots fan, and the Patriots signed Jonnu Smith not long ago to like a pretty expensive tight end contract. He had his worst seasons in New England. Besides that, he had a breakout season in Tennessee right before he signed in New England. Last year, he had a pretty good season in Atlanta, and now he's having a great season in Miami as everybody is paying attention to Tyreek Hill, the run game of A-Shane, Mostert, and Wright, and whoever else, and obviously Jalen Waddle. Jonnu Smith is becoming an awesome screen threat, a guy that does damage after the catch, and we already knew and always knew that Jonnu Smith was this type of athlete. He's quick, he's twitchy, he's physical, he's tough to tackle, and he's actually making some pretty impressive catches over the middle of the field, and he seems to have a rapport with Tua. It feels like ever since Tua went down, and really that final game, that game against the Bills, that I think it was week 2 or week 3, they started to get him involved. And then when Huntley went in there, his role really grew. He gained a rapport with Huntley, honestly, as his favorite receiver. And then since Tua has come back, he's become a guy that's moved the chains, a guy that's kick-started the offense through screens and easy completions and things like that. And now he's really becoming a big part of this offense. So it was unexpected, but it's definitely worth the recognition. Jonnu Smith should be a startable tight end in pretty much all leagues right now, the way that he's playing, especially in PPR, where it feels like he has a pretty high floor due to all the manufactured touches and screens that he is getting in the offense. Will Dissly is another tight end that I think should be available in a majority of leagues, but also should be picked up in majority of leagues after this week, just because he's shown some consistency in this offense with Justin Herbert. He's become more than just a dump off check down option like he was in Seattle with Russell Wilson. In LA, he actually scored a down the seam touchdown against the Bengals. 4 catches, 80 yards and a touchdown, and 6 targets on Sunday Night Football. And Will Dissly has become one of the top 3 targets in this offense. Herbert has always been a fan of throwing to the tight end, whether it be Gerald Everett or Jared Cook over the years, or even Hunter Henry, I believe. But Will Dissly has become an element of this offense where Greg Roman has always operated with tight end success in fantasy football. Think of Mark Andrews, for example. Will Dissly is taking on a role where he can block a little bit, he can catch a little bit, and he's becoming a reliable in the middle of the field pass catcher for one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, who's playing one of the best, at that position, Justin Herbert. So Will Dissly of the Los Angeles Chargers is worth the pickup for sure. Those are 3 tight ends that I would definitely look to target. Taysom Hill is a boom or bust target. Will Dissly, I would say he's attached to Justin Herbert, so there's a lot to be reliable with there. And then also Jonnu Smith feels like a great addition to your fantasy teams, especially because of his manufactured touch role within a good Miami offense now that Tua is there. At the running back position, it's a little bit more slim. If you're missing running backs this week, it's going to be more difficult to find an option, but here's a couple for you. Roschon Johnson of the Chicago Bears is one of them. Roschon Johnson is kind of the goal line running back of the Bears right now. He did have 10 total attempts for 33 yards and a touchdown on top of a catch for 8 yards against the Packers. The Packers have actually been better against the run this year. They've been a little bit worse against the pass, but Johnson has looked impressive. They trust him to do a lot of different things, including short yardage, including goal line work, including even pass blocking at times. So Roschon is the primary backup to Swift, but he's also a complement to Swift. And now that we've seen just a small sample of a new offense post Shane Waldron in Chicago, it looked like Roschon was going to be involved in a 1-2 headed approach for the Bears. And just now with Caleb Williams being just a little bit better, a little bit more successful, this offense being a little bit better coordinated, a little bit better in terms of their play calling, that's just going to raise the efficiency of the entire offense, which is going to allow for more touchdowns, more red zone opportunities for a guy like Roschon Johnson. And clearly, it feels like they looked a lot smoother. Caleb looked a lot more accurate. The Bears looked like they were able to actually do what they wanted to set out to do. And that's something they haven't done for weeks. So with the Bears getting better on offense, it's worth picking up some of their options that might have gone a little bit under the radar in previous weeks. Roschon is one of those guys that might be able to help you out. Guy that's getting 10 attempts, potential touchdown every week, is somebody that can be a flex during a bye week scenario if you have a tough time at the running back position. Amir Abdullah is another one of these running backs that could potentially start for your fantasy team during some bye week struggles. Amir Abdullah is mostly a pass catcher at this point in his career. He's a kick returner at times as well. He's a little bit of a hybrid, do-it-all Swiss Army knife type player for the Las Vegas Raiders. But considering that Zamir White and Alexander Mattison did get injured and Amir Abdullah was the last man standing for the Raiders, I do think he would be the priority in the backfield, considering he's a vet. He knows what he's doing. He understands the offense, and he's a reliable pass blocker and pass catcher for the Raiders. So given that the Raiders have been such a pass-heavy team at times, it feels like he would be a good option, especially because the Raiders are bad. So they're going to be trailing in quite a few of these games coming up, which means Abdullah is going to be on the field more often than not. There are other opportunities out there. Just pay attention to the news when it comes to the Raiders backfield and who they're expected to feature, who they're expected to, maybe they sign somebody, maybe they pop somebody from the practice squad onto the active roster. Just make sure you pay attention to what's going on with the Raiders at that running back position. If White's healthy, if Madison's healthy, how that's all going down. But in my opinion, I think you could do much worse than Abdullah, especially if you're in a PPR league. I think he's definitely a flexible play this next week. At the wide receiver position, I have 4 different options, 2 on the same team. We've talked about the Cleveland Jameis Winston scenario and situation a couple times over the last couple of weeks. I have not brought up Jerry Jeudy that many times, but I feel like I need to bring him up. If he is available in your league, which probably is more of a slimmer league, I would pick him up. I mean, he's shown very good consistency with Jameis Winston, and the thing I've loved with Jameis for fantasy is we've seen great consistency from pretty much all of these options at wide receiver, whether it be David Njoku, Cedric Tillman, Elijah Moore, who I'm going to get to in a second. Jerry Jeudy is also, in that lane as well. He had 8 targets, then 11 targets, and 11 targets with Jameis Winston in 3 games. That is very good numbers. That's 30 targets in 3 games, an average, obviously, of 10 per game. So, I mean, that's really, really good. That's like wide receiver 1 type quality in PPR formats. He did this past week have an 89-yard explosive score against the Saints. He had 6 catches for 142 yards. And I will say Jeudy has looked better in recent weeks. He looks smoother. He looks crisper on his routes. He looks more explosive than I feel like he looked in Denver even. I think Jeudy is definitely an option that I think not only, you could put it 2 different ways. If he's on your waiver wire, I think he's somebody definitely worth picking up, especially if you have a thin wide receiving core and you need somebody to take over for a bye week. But also at the same time, I think if he is owned and you happen to be the owner of Jerry Jeudy, I think he's somebody that you can trust in your lineup for the upcoming weeks, even if it's a difficult matchup and you need somebody to plug in. Jeudy has proven that he's going to get a lot of looks in this offense. Elijah Moore is another player that's getting a lot of looks from Jameis Winston, primarily playing in the slot right now. He is getting a lot of looks. 12 targets, 9 targets, 8 targets the last 3 games with Jameis Winston. That, again, very good numbers right there. So the Browns are passing a lot more. That's the indication. They're throwing the ball a lot more with Jameis Winston. They don't really have a reliable run game. They're playing from behind a lot because their defense isn't quite living up to the hype. And for whatever reason, they're putting up a ton of yards without putting up a ton of points in some of these games, which is a little weird. Eventually, it feels like they'll get into the end zone. They'll score more points. Jameis didn't even throw an interception last game. They had like 400 total yards as a team, and they only scored 14 points, which was rather odd. So expect touchdowns to come. But Elijah Moore this past week did have 8 targets, 6 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown. He was one of those players that did get into the end zone. Elijah Moore has always had talent, quickness, the ability to separate. He's somebody that, along with Jerry Jeudy, 2 guys that have been lost throughout their NFL careers, they're finding a little bit of a rebirth with the gunslinger Jameis Winston in Cleveland. Both worth pickups simply because of the amount of targets they get, the volume they're going to see, and potentially the shootouts they might play in with Jameis at their quarterback position. Quentin Johnston is a player I haven't brought up in a few weeks, but he's been a little bit up and down throughout this NFL season. He's definitely worth a pickup, in my opinion, entering week 12. He had 8 targets against Cincinnati. That's a key number for me because he only converted 2 of those for 48 yards and a touchdown. But I thought we saw a number of opportunities for Johnston to have a massive game against Cincinnati. I thought DJ Turner did a great job covering him down the field a number of times to result in limited opportunities for him to actually catch the ball. But if you're just seeing where he's being targeted, he's being targeted in the end zone. He's being targeted down the field. He's an explosive threat. He's one of their perimeter playmakers. You think about what this offense is through the passing game right now. It's checkdowns to the back, whether it be J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, whoever else. It's throws to Will Dissly in the middle of the field. It's throws to Ladd McConkey, in the middle of the field as that slot player. Josh Palmer occasionally gets a look, but then it's bombs away to Quentin Johnston. And with Justin Herbert being one of the better deep downfield passers in the NFL and just overall one of the most accurate passers in the NFL, this kid has speed. He's got size. He's not the best contested guy, Quentin Johnston, but he can fly by you. And there's certainly going to be, in my opinion, opportunities for him in a number of these games where if you need a high upside option at wide receiver 3 or at your flex spot, you could certainly do worse than Johnston because he's a red zone threat and he's a downfield threat those two things are extremely valuable for fantasy football. Speaking of red zone threat and downfield threat, we have Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers, one of my guys since day one. Christian Watson had his best game of the 2024 NFL season against the Bears. 4 targets, 4 catches, 140 yards, and Tom Brady's player of the game. He didn't quite get a touchdown, but he showcased his ability. And I feel like this is important. It wasn't just a random game for Watson. It wasn't just like a random week for Watson. Yes, it was only 4 targets and 4 catches, but this was after the bye week. Why I think that's so important is because Watson has been beat up throughout his career. He was actually banged up a little bit earlier before the bye week. And we've seen Watson, when he's healthy, he can be a dominant force on a football field because there's just not many 6'4", 6'5" athletes that run the way that Christian Watson does and can create with the ball in his hands the way that Watson does. He can create any catch into a big play. So I really feel like Reed and Watson are the 2 main ingredients to what the Packers passing game should be as an explosive offense. I think moving forward, that's what it's going to be. I think Romeo Doubs will get his targets on the outside occasionally. Wicks has been converted to the 4th receiver after all his drops and missed opportunity. And Tucker Kraft is just a good tight end, but a guy that they want to more so target these receivers. So I think Watson is about to ascend down the stretch and probably show a little bit more consistency than he was earlier in the year, just because it feels like the bye week made the Packers sort of change how they prioritize this receiving core, and I think Watson has become more valuable to it. So expect him to continue his surge against the San Francisco 49ers in the upcoming week. He will get targets. It's a matter of him converting them into big plays. We're going to finish with the quarterback position, a position that you always need to add players at, especially considering a lot of bye weeks this week to important quarterbacks in fantasy. One player that I think you can start for the next 3 games is Drake May. We've talked about Drake May a number of times now as the Patriots rookie quarterback, but there's a reason for that. He's been really good for fantasy pretty much every single week, and people still are not picking him up at a high rate. I still think his ownership is below 25%. It's absolutely outrageous. 282 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 attempts on the ground, 27 yards against a Rams defense that was playing previously over the last few weeks as a top 5 to top 10 defense, one of the best pass rushes in football, a complex, confusing scheme for a rookie quarterback. It doesn't really matter who he has blocking for him or who's catching his ball. Drake May is going out there and putting up fantasy stats. Nearly 300 passing yards, 300 total yards in this game against LA, and he had 2 touchdowns on the day. We've seen him run the ball successfully. We've seen him throw the ball successfully. We've seen him now 30 for 40 against the Rams. Be accurate, be precise, be consistent throwing the ball. We've also seen him be explosive in other games against the Texans and against the Jacksonville Jags. We've seen him throw the ball down the field. So he has every element of a fantasy quarterback that you want to be able to start. Plus, he's playing Miami, Indianapolis, and Arizona in the upcoming games. Miami is a little bit tougher, I guess, for the next week. It's not horrible, though. I would still consider starting him. Indy and Arizona are my favorite matchups there on that schedule. I could see Miami and Arizona being a little bit of a shootout back and forth type games in those next couple of weeks. And I wouldn't be shocked if Drake May led them to 1 or 2 victories within this stretch as well, the way that he is performing. He feels like right now, weirdly enough, as a rookie quarterback on a bad team, he has been pretty close to being fantasy proof because of the amount of times the Patriots are going to trail in a game and the skill set that he actually offers, which is extremely well-rounded. He's kind of like Josh Allen light, okay? So Drake May is definitely worth an addition on your team and a start within the next 3 weeks. Bo Nix is our final addition of week number 12. Bo Nix, another rookie quarterback, had an awesome week this week against Atlanta. He was 28 for 33, 307, and 4 touchdowns. What I loved about it was it wasn't a lot about Bo Nix. It was actually about the offense. A lot of screen passes, a lot of getting the ball out, a lot of letting these playmakers operate in space, and Sean Payton had a beautiful game plan. He's understanding what Bo Nix does well, and he's letting him thrive, and I felt like he was kind of manufacturing some touchdowns for Bo Nix. So if that continues, Bo Nix has a really nice matchup in week 12. I'd consider him picking him up against the Raiders. The Raiders are not a very good team, not a very good defense. The Broncos are favored in that game. This is a guy in Bo Nix that, believe it or not, has 19 total touchdowns. He actually caught a touchdown. He has 4 rushing touchdowns. He has 14 passing touchdowns. He's been the rookie of the month in one of the months. I doubted this kid, but he's in a great scenario. He has great pass protection. Courtland Sutton's been a good receiver for him. Other guys like Mims are stepping up and making plays, and they can run the ball. They can protect him. It feels like he's the perfect complement to what Sean Payton wants to be in 2024. So those are my favorite must-adds, my 10 favorite must-adds of week number 12. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, Gronk, spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe. And don't forget to sign up to OwnersBox Fantasy. Click the link. Use the code PP100. It's Mitch. Deuces. Good luck.